everybody, welcome to the third video in my whole damn collection series. Today I'm going to be showing you all of the movies that are start with the letter B in my collection. And this is the first video, if you watch the video just before this, that I will be doing my contest. So if you want to enter the contest, all you have to do is review one of the movies I will be discussing in this video as a video response, and just make sure that you mention somewhere in the video that it is a response to this video. You can't just upload an old review that you've had in your collection forever. It has to be made specifically for the contest. And you have 2 weeks in which you can win a Midnight in Paris poster and a DVD, a secret DVD that was mentioned in my letter A's whole damn collection video. So, pretty exciting. Okay, so this will be somewhat in alphabetical order. I have to do this in a specific way so my DVDs don't get out of order, but you'll notice as you go by. The Blu-ray for The Dark Knight. Who doesn't have this in their Blu-ray collection? I think this is one of the highest selling Blu-rays of all time, and for good reason. It's a masterpiece, it's a great movie, it should have won the Oscar that year, we all know that. It's The Dark Knight, why really even talk about it? This is an amazing film. Christopher Nolan. Also very good is Batman Begins, which was the movie in which The Dark Knight was the sequel to. Again, everyone knows that this is a good movie, a little underrated, I think, because The Dark Knight has taken off in a way that people tend to forget about Batman Begins, but this is a great movie. Liam Neeson does a great performance in here. Cillian Murphy as one of the main villains. Batman Begins. Great movie. This is the DVD version. This is a special 2-disc version that came with a comic book and a few other things too. And I have a hard time letting this go because I really like the packaging here, but I'll probably eventually get the Blu-ray instead. Keep the Batman a-rollin'. Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which was the feature-length movie that came out as a spin-off from the original 90s cartoon, done in the same sort of Art Deco style. Really good movie. Actually, I really like this movie a lot. I mean, I love that series also. But this movie has a great story, very interesting. Kind of goes into a certain part of Batman's back history that no other movie really tends to do. It's sort of like Jesus in the Bible. He's a kid and then all of a sudden he's an adult. In this movie you see a little bit of his college years and you kind of see how that transition into Batman happens. It's kind of like Batman Begins before Batman Begins in some ways, but it's a great movie and I would definitely recommend it if you're a fan of Batman. Batman Returns, I think maybe the most underrated of all of the Batman franchise. This movie has a certain kind of wit and dark cynicism that none of the other movies have. It was written by the same writer who did Heathers. So there's some great one-liners and some great dialogue in this movie that none of the other movies have. Even the first one, this was the second one done by Tim Burton, and his art direction is all over this thing. I think I've always said this is a better Tim Burton movie than a Batman movie per se, but it's great, and I really love all the performances. Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, are some of the more captivating villains in the Batman series. Alright, the Batman Blu-ray Digibook, the original 1989 Tim Burton movie with Jack Nicholson as the Joker. It's a classic, everyone's seen it, no reason to really talk about it. Looks good on Blu-ray, great set design, one of Tim Burton's best movies, one of the best Batman movies, I would say third best after Batman Begins. Yeah. Okay, here's a movie I really like, and again, one of my all-time favorites. Like I said in the beginning of the video, a lot of my favorite movies are going to be in this video. Barton Fink, which is a great Coen Brothers movie. I think it won the Palme d'Or that year at Cannes Film Festival. Came out in, I think, around 91, 92. Stars John Turturro and John Goodman. Takes place in the 1930s or 40s, during the golden age of Hollywood. It's kind of a movie about movies. It's a very existential, very psychological, very surreal. I think this is one of the Coen brothers' most interesting and different kind of movies, and very funny too. If you like them for their comedy, this is one of their funniest. Baghead by the brothers Duplass, who just released Jeff Who Lives at Home. If you liked that movie, seen in limited release, then you should check out their older movies like this one. This is a kind of a horror movie parody of sorts. It has to do with a bunch of young 20-somethings who go out in the woods to make a horror movie, and then all of a sudden all this weird stuff starts happening, and they don't know if it's just people playing pranks or if it's really something to be worried about. Really interesting young cast as part of the mumblecore movement, which I don't subscribe to that word, but it's the only thing that I guess out there to call these movies. A lot of improvisation, really, really low budget, but really interesting. I like this movie. Badlands, directed by Terrence Malick, 1973, I want to say. Starring Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen, a very young Martin Sheen. It's kind of a Lovers on the Run type of movie, sort of a Bonnie and Clyde-esque kind of thing with like a Southern Gothic twist. And it's really good. Of course, Terrence Malick would later do movies like The Thin Red Line and The New World and The Tree of Life that just came out. This movie is probably his most different. It's the most genre of all of his movies and probably the most like easy to just kind of sit down and watch, and also his shortest movie. So I'd say even if you're not a Terrence Malick fan per se, I think you would like this movie because it's quite a bit more digestible than a lot of his later, more ethereal work. Bad Lieutenant, starring Harvey Keitel. Not the new Bad Lieutenant with Nick Cage. This is the old Bad Lieutenant, directed by Abel Ferrara in 1991, I think. This came around the same year as Harvey Keitel did Reservoir Dogs, and a little while later he did The Piano as kind of the big comeback for Harvey Keitel. He was a big Scorsese actor in the 70s, kind of disappeared through a lot of the 80s, and then he had the big comeback in the independent film movement of the 90s, and this is one of the reasons that helped him with that. NC-17, very dark, very shocking, very graphic, has to do with him solving a case of a raped nun, and he is a bad lieutenant. He's a drug addict, he's a gambling addict, and he is addicted to prostitutes, and he really goes crazy. If you've seen the Nick Cage thing, it's similar, but I think this movie takes the subject matter a lot more seriously, and it's a lot more grounded and gritty. The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, directed by Danny Boyle. I think one of Danny Boyle's lesser-known movies, one of his less popular movies, not as well received. I think this was the first thing that DiCaprio did post-Titanic, and the world was kind of over him. He was really overexposed at that time, and this was just kind of a little, almost independent movie that came out. It was a big movie for Danny Boyle. It's one of his more expensive ones he did at that point in his career, but I think for DiCaprio and his fans, they weren't into the idea of him being in this strange, moody thriller, kind of Lord of the Flies-esque. It's about him and a group of friends, other Americans in Thailand, who find a secret map to a secret beach where a secret society is living a secret life, and at first everything seems great, and then it all kind of goes downhill. But it's a great movie, and I think is a really interesting one. Kind of a messy ending, but it's definitely interesting, especially if you're a fan of Danny Boyle. Beauty and the Beast, the Diamond Edition. Not much to say about this movie. Obviously, it's terrific. Nominated for Best Picture back before they had the Best Animated category. This was up the same year as Silence of the Lambs. Clearly, it didn't win. But it's a great movie, great music. Alan Menken in there as the musicians or songwriters. Looks great on Blu-ray. There's some extra footage they added here when they released the Diamond Edition. Some really good special features on here too. Beetlejuice, another Tim Burton film, Tim Burton classic in my opinion, I think one of his best films. This came out in 1987, a classic dark comedy, takes place in the afterlife. If you haven't seen this movie, then you've been living under a rock. I want to get this movie on Blu-ray, and I think they have it at Walmart for really cheap right now, so I'm probably going to trade up pretty soon, because I think this is a movie that could benefit from being seen on Blu-ray. Really young performances from both Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, and some great claymation special effects that kind of Harryhausen-esque, done in the Tim Burton style. Definitely check this out if you never have. I'll show these two at the same time to move things along. We got Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, or vice versa. Still haven't watched these. I got these both as presents from the same person, and she's going to be mad that I haven't seen these yet, but I do want to see these. I love Richard Linklater, who's the director of these, and I know they're kind of talking heads movies, you know, very dialogue driven, which I'm interested in. And yeah, they're in my collection, but I haven't seen them yet, so I can't really say much. It's going to seem like I'm a real Tim Burton-ophile, but Big Fish, the special edition, it comes with it's a really cool edition actually, and I don't think this has been re-released on Blu-ray yet, but comes with this storybook with original art from Tim Burton inside, which is really interesting. I think this is maybe the last really good movie he's done. I haven't been too impressed with a lot of his later films. In fact, I kind of think he's gone from a really promising, interesting art kind of director to a hack, really, honestly. But I love this movie to death, and I really think it is because he didn't get any respect for this movie is the reason he has become what he's become now. But I love this movie. Big Lebowski, Blu-ray Digibook, Coen Brothers, a huge Coen Brothers fan. You'll see them pop up a lot in this collection series. Love this movie. Probably one of my all-time favorite comedies. When I'm working at the video store and I have to recommend comedies for people, I usually point to this one first because, you know, for a lot of people, it's still not a movie they've seen, but they may have heard about, and it's very funny. It's very strange. The plot is super convoluted and almost doesn't make sense the first time you see it, until at the end you realize it doesn't have to make sense. But it's really funny. I think Jeff Bridges and John Goodman give their best performances maybe ever in their career in this movie, and that's not hyperbole. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of the two sides to the Coen Brothers. There's their dark side and their comedic side, and I think this is my favorite comedy by them. The Big Red One, old war movie directed by Sam Fuller, starring Mark Hamill, actually. This is probably one of the most important things Mark Hamill did outside of the Star Wars collection, and it should be seen by everybody. I think this is a really underrated, different kind of war film done by a kind of a classic director he'd been doing a lot of work for a long time before this movie, but it's this is the reconstruction version, so it's quite a bit longer than the theatrical cut. Okay, these next three you're going to notice kind of go together in a kind of funny way, and it's only that they're together like this because I alphabetize everything. But I have Black Dynamite, which is the blaxploitation parody starring Michael Jai White. I think this is one of the best, like, grindhouse lampoons to ever come out. Even better than I think Planet Terror or Death Proof, and certainly better than some of the newer ones like Piranha 3D or Rubber. I love this movie to death. I think it's so funny, and everybody in this movie, it's just a spot-on parody, and it's so great. I bought this for $1 when my FYE was closing at our mall, and it is a blaxploitation 2-film feature with the Black Gestapo and the Black Six. I still haven't watched these yet because I just haven't got to it, but I really love this type of stuff, obviously from Black Dynamite, and I have other blaxploitation movies too, which you'll see pop up in my collection. I think they're a hoot, and they're a really interesting time capsule period of time that's like sort of early to late 70s. Blaxploitation movement and all of the strange films that came out of there. They were kind of weirdly un-PC even though they were trying to appeal to a very specific demographic, obviously. But yeah, have to get to these at some point. I want to have kind of like sort of a party to view these. This isn't the type of movies you just want to watch by yourself. Along the same lines, I have The Black Shampoo, which is a blaxploitation movie about a secret agent who also works as a hairdresser, which you'll notice has kind of a similar look to Black Dynamite. I think Black Dynamite was something of a parody of this movie, as well as a lot of other famous blaxploitation films. But yeah, I kind of have a thing for these movies. I can't really say why. Moving right along, the Blu-ray for Black Swan, one of my favorite movies of that year. What was that, 2 years ago? Yeah, the same year that Social Network came out, King's Speech. Love this movie, directed by Darren Aronofsky. Really dark, really surreal. Natalie Portman won Best Actress for this, and it was well deserved. Great dancing, kind of a fun mishmash of a lot of other horror movies that I love a lot, and a great homage, I think. And a lot of people really treated this as kind of like an art house kind of thing, and it was to a certain extent, but I think even more so, it nods its head to a lot of other classic horror films. Blade, the original Blade on DVD. I don't have Blade 2 yet, and I have no interest in buying Blade 3 because I didn't really like it, or Blade Trinity as it were. But this one's really great. I think this movie is really the movie you can kind of look back and see was the first comic book movie, beside the Batman movies, or Superman movies earlier than that. But this was kind of the first movie that kind of brought upon the comic book movie craze that we're still living in today. I think this doesn't get enough credit for that, because this was one of the first movies that really took a comic book franchise and treated it seriously and really gave it a good budget with a star. And then shortly thereafter we had X-Men and Spider-Man, and the whole thing really blew up. But yeah, this is a really fun movie and a really interesting take on the modern day vampire. I think the scene at the beginning where he attacks the vampire blood rave is still like one of my favorite scenes from any vampire movie. Really interesting, fun movie. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner on DVD. I do want to get this on Blu-ray. But this is, it's Blade Runner. Again, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this movie. You know, interesting cyberpunk, kind of a cult classic that is, I think, has gained a lot of clout over the years, becoming less and less of a cult movie and more of just kind of a general classic. Wonderful production design that's still being copied in every science fiction movie since, about a man who hunts robots, essentially, evil robots, and discovers the secrets of his own past. One of my all-time favorite movies, David Lynch's Blue Velvet. Again, this was just re-released on Blu-ray, and I'm definitely going to be rebuying this one because I love this movie. Love this movie. This is still my favorite David Lynch movie. I have a lot of his movies in my collection, but I think this one, besides the fact that it's one of his more accessible movies, it's not as strange, it's one of his more linear films, I think the performance by Dennis Hopper in here is just terrifying and wonderful. The art direction is so perfect and spot on, and the juxtaposition from the happy small town thing with like the dark psychosexuality. I could go on about this movie forever. I just think this is one of the all-time best thrillers ever made, and it would be in probably my top 2015 favorite movies. Mel Brooks, Blazing Saddles. This was in a DVD update I did somewhat recently ago, so I won't talk too much about this movie, but other than to say that it's great, one of my favorite Mel Brooks parody movies that he did. Another Coen Brothers movies, their first movie to be, in fact, we have Blood Simple on DVD. This is a really interesting movie. I'd say if you're a fan of No Country for Old Men and Fargo and that kind of side of the Coen Brothers, their first movie, Blood Simple, really kind of shows that direction that they would go in, and shows that sensibility even long before those movies. I think this and No Country for Old Men would make a great double feature. They both kind of take place in Texas and have a lot to do with being hunted and all that kind of stuff. And this is still one of their best movies, even though it's made for quite a bit lower budget than most of their other movies. It's made independently, early young performance by Frances McDormand. Yeah, great movie. Kind of in a similar vein, we have Body Heat, directed by Lawrence Kasdan, written and directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who normally is a writer. He did a lot of the rewrites or script revisions for some of the Star Wars movies and Indiana Jones movies. He was kind of a Spielberg-Lucas guy. And he got his own money to do his movie, and he kind of did it's somewhat of a remake, I suppose, or reimagining of Double Indemnity, the old film noir classic, and it's kind of like an old-style 40s film noir set in like the early 80s Florida, and it's a really wonderful, moody, atmospheric, sexy movie starring William Hurt and Katherine Turner, and I love this movie a lot. It's really a lot of fun to watch. Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights, which I still have in the 2-disc DVD with the slipcover. Great cover art there. One of my favorite cover arts for a DVD. So it's kind of his Robert Altman-esque interpretation, like kind of a dark comedy of sorts, or dark comedy drama about the porn industry from the 1970s. I still think this is one of my favorite P.T. Anderson movies. It's between this and There Will Be Blood, which those two movies couldn't be any more different. But I really love this movie a lot. And the fact that he's like my age when he made this, like 26, 27 years old, it pisses me off immensely, because this is just so good. And nobody my age should be that good at anything. Yeah, one of the best films of the 90s for sure. One of the best performances by Mark Wahlberg, and a really great all-star cast. The Book of Eli on Blu-ray. Now this isn't a movie that I've ever really gone back and watched again since I bought it. I remember liking it a lot when I saw it on Blu-ray the first time when I rented it. And it's kind of a Mad Max post-apocalyptic sort of Fallout video game sort of style thing, starring Gary Oldman, Denzel Washington, and it sort of has sort of a spaghetti western-esque quality to it, I suppose. It has some heavy-handed messaging that goes through the movie. It has to deal with religion and the Bible, and that gets a little annoying, I suppose, and probably one of the reasons why I didn't really go back to watch this movie again. But it looks great on Blu-ray, and it's pretty well directed, and despite some of the heavy-handed message in the movie, I think it's one of the better kind of kind of movies since probably Mad Max or Escape from New York or those kind of things. The Boondock Saints, just the first one. I don't own the second one. Blu-ray or on DVD. Everyone's seen this movie. I might as well not even really talk about it. But it's good. I think it's not as good as some people like to think it is. I think it's a fun kind of action movie. It kind of reminds me a little bit in style of a Guy Ritchie style kind of movie. Takes place in Boston with two Irish Americans who feel as though they're blessed by God to bring vengeance upon the crime in the city, and Willem Dafoe is trying to hunt them down, and that part's done really well. The idea of like these criminals who are kind of doing these things, and this cop that's trying to pursue them, but he kind of sympathizes with their cause, and I get the appeal for this movie, and I like it enough to own it. But I do feel it's been kind of overrated over the years, and it brings a certain kind of macho dude type that defends this movie more than they need to. Here's a really underrated comedy, in my opinion, and it is called Bowfinger, directed by Frank Oz, written and directed by Frank Oz. It's written by Steve Martin and directed by Frank Oz, and it stars Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy. And it's really super funny, and I think it's kind of a laugh-a-minute sort of ridiculous comedy that under the hands of anybody else other than Steve Martin and Frank Oz, it probably could have been a really dumb movie, but I think it is so funny, and it's I think a largely underrated, underlooked comedy. Almost done. We have Brick, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt. This came out a few years ago. I want to say something like 5-6 years ago. This was one of the movies I think that really put Joseph Gordon back on the map post his teenage Third Rock from the Sun kind of thing, when he was doing a lot of independent films, really interesting stuff, and it's a really good performance. Also a film noir. It takes place during modern day high school, but it has a lot of sort of the style and speak and tone of a 1940s noir. The dialogue could have been lifted right from, you know, a classic noir. But I love this movie, and it's a really interesting kind of Sundance thriller. Okay, you're gonna laugh at me, but Bring It On, the original, starring Kirsten Dunst, I think it's a great movie. I think it's really funny. And it's definitely kind of a cheesy late 90s or early 2000s style teen comedy, but I have a soft spot for teen comedies. I really do. And I think this movie is actually a lot of fun. I'm not going to defend it too much because I know everything that's wrong with it and a lot of the reasons why people don't care for this movie. But I think if you look at this movie without the context of the straight-to-DVD sequels and all of that kind of stuff, and Kirsten Dunst and her popularity and all that kind of stuff, this is a pretty clever little teen movie. Broken Flowers, directed by Jim Jarmusch, starring Bill Murray. This was kind of one of those late Bill Murray kind of performances. He was doing a lot of movies like this at that time. This is a little bit after he did Lost in Translation, and his character is very similar. Kind of this guy with a lot of regrets, and he kind of goes back in his past and tries to look up all of his past relationships and sort of figure himself out in the process. And it's a pretty great movie. I think it's a really good performance, probably a better performance than a movie per se, but it's definitely worth looking at if you've never seen it. Bronson, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, who also recently did Drive, and the Pusher trilogy before this, and this stars Tom Hardy, which will be playing Bane later in this year's Dark Knight Rises. This is a really interesting, strange, kind of fucked up movie about a real-life criminal from England who spent more of his life in jail than out, kind of institutionalized, and he's kind of a hyper-violent, spontaneously violent kind of guy. And the movie's directed in a very specific, stylish kind of way that's very reminiscent of Clockwork Orange era Kubrick. There's a lot of Kubrick all over this movie. I think Nicholas Winding Refn is very much sort of in line with Tarantino. He takes from the directors he likes. And yeah, this feels very much like a Clockwork Orange. I'd say if you're a fan of this movie, there's a chance you'll like this one. And great central performance by Tom Hardy. I think just an outstanding performance. This is why I go and see any Tom Hardy movie, no matter what it is because of how good he was in this. The Brood, directed by David Cronenberg, another director you'll see a lot in my collection. One of his earliest movies came out in 1979. A lot of people say this was his first serious film. It, you know, wasn't as schlocky as some of his early low-budget horror stuff. Although this is a low-budget horror film, it's about a guy who's suffering from a divorce, and his wife holds a lot of resentment against him still, but she's kind of caught up in this crazy cult. And while meanwhile going through custody battle, kind of like Kramer versus Kramer with evil creatures running around. There's these small childlike creatures who are kind of running around and murdering people, and he's trying to figure out where they're coming from and what the whole connection with everything is. And it comes to a very crazy climax. Brotherhood of the Wolf. which is a French film. It's been a long time since I've seen this, so I almost can't really say anything about it. I bought this because I had seen it before, but it's been so long I don't really remember what it's about. But I know it's really stylish and has some of the best fight scenes I've ever seen. Some of the best choreographed martial arts. And that's, I think, the reason why I bought it. I have to look at it again if I can really say if it's a great movie, but I remember being pretty impressed with it, you know, something like 7 or so years ago when I saw this for the first time. The Brave Little Toaster, again, this was in a recent video update, so I won't talk too much about this movie other than to say it's a really good early 80s Disney flick that I think is very underlooked amongst all of the other Disney films. Really fun songs, really fun voice talent, and I think a lot of the themes that are in this movie were later resurrected in Toy Story 3. Buffalo 66, written and directed and starring Vincent Gallo. Christina Ricci, one of her first movies she did after she hit puberty, and it's a kind of a dark comedy of sorts about a guy who just got out of jail, and he sort of drags around this girl, sort of against her will, but not really, to a point because she kind of likes the adventure of it all, and he's trying to get revenge on somebody who wronged him while he was in jail. And it kind of goes in all these interesting, weird places. Angelica Houston plays his mother, and she's really, really good in the movie. And there's a lot of great sequences in the movie. A really interesting independent film right before the Focus Features era of independent film really took off. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, starring Christy Swanson. Of course, later this would be turned into the television series, starring Sarah Michelle Gellar. But I actually really like the movie quite a bit more than the series. There's a certain kind of kitschy, early 90s quality to this movie. Very time capsule for that specific period of time and what teen movies were like back then. She plays kind of a California Valley girl who has to hunt vampires. I don't even know why I'm explaining this plot. Everyone knows what Buffy is. But this is really good. I'd say if you're a fan of the series or you know anything about the series, but you've never seen this movie, it's quite a bit different, and I can't really exactly say that you'll like it. But if you like these kinds of movies, if you were like a big fan of the early 90s kind of doughy teen comedies of that time, then you'll get a kick out of this, and I certainly do. A Bug's Life, Pixar Blu-ray, actually. Well, it's Seven Samurai with bugs. I mean, what else is there to say other than that? Coen Brothers, another one of theirs, Burn After Reading. A lot of people really didn't like this movie, I think, because it was their follow-up to No Country for Old Men, which they won the Oscar for, and this was kind of going back to their quirky comedy style. And a lot of people really downed on this movie, but I think had anybody else done this movie, it wouldn't have been so. It would have been looked at more honestly than it was regarded by people who were coming off of No Country for Old Men high. I think this is a really great movie, a really clever script, and really a lot of fun performances in here. A lot of chock full of actors doing some of their best overacting, yeah, it's kind of like. Kind of like if you took Fargo and Big Lebowski and then they had like a weird love child together. And it isn't as good as either of those movies. It's not as good as a lot of their movies, but it's still not a bad movie by any means. Neil Jordan's The Butcher Boy, something of an auteur work for him, and it takes place in the post-World War II, I want to say, or pre-World War II maybe, Ireland. Kind of like a really dark version of Oliver Twist. If you took Oliver Twist and made him just like a complete bastard, There's a lot of really dark stuff in here about like his father and abuse and those kind of things. It goes a lot of strange places. The tone is all over the place, but I'd say if you like Neil Jordan and his work, Crying Game, etc. Crying Game, Interview with the Vampire, some of his other work. It has some similarities stylistically to that, but it's quite a strange movie. All right, well there you go. That's everything I have in the letter B. Sorry if this video is just super long, but like I said, I had a lot to take care of in this video. So remember, if you want to win a Midnight in Paris poster as well as a secret DVD that was from my letter A collection, then please leave a video response below of a review of any of the movies I discuss in this video. And I hope to see you guys later. Also, if you just want to leave comments in general, you don't have to enter the contest, obviously. But if you want to leave a comment about anything that I talked about in this video, or have any questions regarding some of the stuff that I've shown, leave a comment below. And I will see you guys later.